Hi, I'm Michel Bayan, and welcome to the SourceDS.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of the SourceDS podcast. My guest today is the CEO of Princess House, Connie Tang. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with this wonderful, progressive executive who really stands for something. She is really a champion of diversity in the industry. We just had a great conversation about all the work she's done to champion diversity, and not just for its own sake. You know, diversity is not only right, it's good business. And Connie does a great job of laying out that case in a very compelling manner. We also talk about her really interesting childhood. We both share in common being the children of immigrants growing up in New York City, how she learned how to speak Spanish because of that, and her experience at Princess House and how she's working to take this real legacy brand and bring it forward into the modern age. So I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation, and thanks a lot for listening.
Okay, Connie Tang, I have been looking forward to this conversation for some time. Welcome to the SourceDS podcast.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm very happy to be here.
You know, it's interesting. When I was doing some research and kind of stalking you on the internet a little bit, I realized that we are both the son of, you're not the son, I'm the son, and you're the daughter of immigrant parents, and we both grew up in New York City. That was a really interesting and formative experience for me. Tell me, how was that experience like for you growing up, and how has it shaped you into the leader you've become today?
I have to say, I think growing up the daughter of immigrants and as an American immigrant, especially in the environment of New York City, has completely shaped who I am today as a human being, as a person, as well as a global citizen. We immigrated to New York when I was 10 months old. So I was a baby when we came in, and we moved into the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Before it was really cool. Now it's cool. When we lived there, it was the ghetto.
I remember.
It was the ghetto, and I say that lovingly. And we were the only, and I'm not joking, the only non-Hispanic, which meant non-Puerto Rican, non-Dominican, non-African American family. Everybody knew who we were. We were the little Chinese family. I was Connie, la Chinita, the little Chinese girl. And it was an experience. You know, I joke about it and I say, you know, those movies you used to watch where people are warming their hands, standing on the sidewalk over a steel drum of trash? That was my neighborhood. And that's where we grew up. That's where I grew up for the first 8 years of my life. And that is also where I learned to speak Spanish. When, growing up, the notion of stay-at-home mom or having a stay-at-home parent at all was unfamiliar and foreign. Everyone in my family were dual income earners. Everyone worked long hours. And when we first immigrated, I had an aunt who took care of me because she sewed in her apartment. And her son, my cousin, was a toddler. But when he turned 5, which was about less than a year after we immigrated, she went back to work outside in a factory. And my parents needed somebody to take care of me. Well, someone, I don't know who, told my parents, hey, the lady upstairs doesn't work. Maybe she'll take care of your daughter. So they knocked on her door, and she didn't speak English. She was from the Dominican Republic. One of her children translated for my father, who did speak English well enough to get a job at a bank and as an accountant. And they agreed she was going to take care of me. So at 7:30 in the morning, I would go upstairs when my parents left for work. And I remember going up there with my plastic bag of canned food. It would have been the No Frills brand of SpaghettiOs and maybe some chicken noodle soup, ravioli. That was my lunch. So I went up with my food, and I would stay there until about 7:30 at night. My parents would call me from the staircase, and I knew they were home, and I would come down and have dinner with my parents. And lots of times, especially as I got a little bit older, I was 2 at the time. So I remember spending right after dinner, going back upstairs and hanging out with my Spanish babysitter. And I remember my first memories of Mission Impossible on TV were actually in Spanish. And I remember the first time I saw it in English, I said, oh, look, it's in English too. And so that was my first 8 years, all the way through to third grade, was in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And from there, my parents saved up enough money to move us to Brooklyn. And once again, I found myself in an environment where we were the minority, literally. We moved into a 100% white, Irish, Catholic American neighborhood. We were still the only Chinese people and still the little Chinese family. And I was at that time one of only 2 Chinese kids in the entire elementary school. In the Lower East Side, my public school was very diverse. You can imagine we had Black kids, we had Jewish kids, we had Hispanic kids, we had Chinese kids, we had Asian kids, right? So it was adapting to another environment. And I would say that those experiences would lead me to develop the skills to adapt. And as an adult, as a professional in my career development, the ability to adapt and to communicate and to interact with people who were different or who didn't speak the same language as I did was something that has been a tremendous benefit and certainly shaped my experiences as I grew up. And, the years with the Spanish babysitter in New York, because, as I said, she was from the Dominican Republic, she didn't speak English. I remember vividly pointing at things and she saying it in Spanish. And so I began speaking Spanish at the age of 2. And at 2, you're probably just learning to speak. And Chinese was at home. And my mother had a rule. She said, we are Chinese. You speak in Spanish to your Spanish babysitter during the day. And of course, by the time I started kindergarten, she said, you're watching TV and in school for English. When we are home, you will talk to me in Chinese. And so to my great fortune, to this day, I am still trilingual, which later on, again, helped tremendously as I worked in global internationalization in my former roles. And it was quite an experience to be a diverse person. I didn't know any better. I didn't have a choice. I didn't choose to be diverse. I didn't choose to be trilingual. It happened. And fortunately, it ended up shaping a lot of my career opportunities and the path that would end up evolving into the life that I have today.
It's so amazing, Connie, because you during your story, you're triggering all these memories from me growing up in New York, and and like we could just nerd out on that for an hour, I'm sure, and all the interesting parallels. And it's so funny. Thank you for sharing, because I never thought about that concept of adaptability, but hearing you say it, it's like, oh man, yeah, me too. And it's so interesting how growing up in these diverse cultures and moving around a little bit shapes us into people that not only are able to adapt, but also maybe have an appreciation for diversity that might not come, without that experience.
Absolutely.
And that leads me to the next thing I was going to ask you is you've been a big advocate both for women and diversity in general. How has this become an important subject for you? A lot of people think when they're not really big diversity advocates that a lot of times they think diversity is just kind of for its own sake, right? But I would imagine you have a perspective that says, yes, we need it because all people are the same, but there's also business benefits to it as well, aren't there?
Absolutely. I can tell you that diversity for me personally is a passion point. I see myself, as I'm sure you do too, as a walking, talking example of the American dream. I see myself as a global citizen, and I see myself as a participant in the world, not just this state, this country, right? Or even this one company of Princess House.
Yep.
And diversity is good business, to be frank. It is time and time again, studies have shown that organizations that have diverse workforce, diverse executives, diverse boards are much more productive, are more innovative, and certainly much more strategic in their business development opportunities. And the reason for that is because the world is globalizing in terms of the customer base, in terms of your audience and stakeholder base. The old barriers and obstacles of distance, of geography, of language are now blurring and or disappearing because of technology. You no longer are blind when you see a post that shows up in Korean on your Facebook feed because you can hit translate because of Google Translate, right? You no longer have the obstacle of prohibitive costs to connecting with diverse audiences, whether it be customers or potential business partners on the global scale, because you have Skype, because you have FaceTime, because you have WeChat, because you have WhatsApp, right? So it is good business because there are so many more tools that allow you to overcome what once were barriers and challenges to doing business. They no longer are costs of doing business. It also is strategically smart because it allows for different experiences, different cultures, as well as different mindsets and thinking to inform your overall development of business planning and execution. It really is a manifestation in practical business terms of what the melting pot used to mean. Melting pot years ago was a definition of a neighborhood that was gentrifying, right? It used to be, it's a common phrase used for very diverse communities like a New York City. And that was used to be to describe how people got along. It really was. It used to be terminology that was used to say, look at this, we've got different people from different places who speak different languages who all get along and live in the same neighborhood. Now it has business applications, and it truly does have benefits with all businesses, and all the studies will prove to you that there are, the diversity is good business. You look at just, let's take the example of State Street Capital. The whole purpose of putting Fearless Girl on Wall Street facing the bull is speaking about diversity of gender on corporate boards in financial institutions. So diversity for me also is important to understand that diversity crosses the boundaries of gender, religion, culture, language, and geography. There's so many layers of diversity. It's important that we understand diversity can also be even political orientation, right? Sexual orientation.
Yeah, imagine that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's all diversity that comes into play. Diversity is hard, though. Managing diversity, understanding it, and then I actually think there are layers of diversity. There is understanding what diversity really is. Then there is the next layer of accepting it. And then the third piece of it is embracing it.
Yeah.
Very different. Knowing that it exists, it's tolerating it. Accepting it means I deal with it. Embracing it means I am now leveraging it, I'm owning it, and I'm not only taking it, but I'm giving it back, whether it's in the form of my business development, whether it's in my form of communication or motivation or training. So there's so much that we can continue to learn as a whole of what diversity really means. More importantly, how do we recognize the advantages of it and apply it? That's the magic, is when you can apply it. And at Princess House, we've really done it.
Yeah, you've worked on that in your capacity when you were with the DSA, right? Didn't you lead one of the diversity empowerment committees there?
Absolutely. I was the founding chairperson for the Diversity and Empowerment Council. So when we made the decision at the DSA, the board approved the formation of the Diversity and Empowerment Council. It was very specifically to allow for a core group of individuals to be the, let's call it the brain trust that would bring back information, that would bring back research, that would bring back opportunities for our member companies to learn about diversity, to take away best practices that some companies were already testing and seeing results from in terms of how diversity and what role it played in their business development.
Can you share a highlight of what came out of that?
Absolutely. I mean, I can tell you that number one, certainly it helped us to address the concerns that our opportunity is isolated or limited to certain populations. We can certainly prove that there's benefit, financial and economic impact in terms of diversity in our direct selling industry. I can tell you that in my company, in Princess House particularly, we have a majority Hispanic consultant base and customer base. And in my current population and demographic, they are primarily first-generation immigrant, which also means for me that they have a limited level of education attainment and also access to technology. Direct selling has been an enabler for them in terms of bridging some of those gaps that education might pose an obstacle for, as well as access because of household income. And the Diversity Empowerment Council was able to bring to light through the form of research projects in collaboration with the Direct Selling Education Foundation to allow professors to look at economic impact. We were able to present to the membership base at annual meetings exposure and case studies. One was in particular, we had Primerica come in and talk about what the growth and development of the surprise, women's segment in their business and the African American segment meant in terms of rates of growth, as well as total overall contribution to their total sales growth over the past decade. And that's pretty phenomenal because they were very much so male-dominated sales force and customer base, and very much so, I would say, homogenous and not very diverse in their base. So they really spoke about what they did to formulate a sense of belonging in the African American business base, as well as what women did to embrace the opportunity Primerica had. So that was a wonderful opportunity to share, here's what we did, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, here's how we went about it, here are the investments we made, here's what our sales force taught us. So to give them a platform in front of all of our member companies, that's great learning that you can take away.
That's amazing.
Again, was sponsored by the Diversity Empowerment Council.
And yeah, and you see more and more companies embracing diversity, and especially in terms of their field. I mean, I think a lot of companies were already just kind of surprised to find that they already had a lot of diversity without even knowing about it or thinking about it, because the field sometimes, just kind of takes that into their own hands. But making it a conscious effort of furthers that conversation we're having right now in the industry about, there's lots of different kinds of people that are interacting with our companies, and they all want different experiences. So continuing on this idea of diversity, you being a female executive, you've been around for a while, you've been through a few different companies. What are the qualities that you try to embody and bring to the table as a female executive?
I don't know if the values or the leadership style that I employ and use are specific to being a woman. I guess I don't know because I've never been anything but, right? And so...
I mean, I think maybe a better question, because you're touching on what I'm really trying to get to is, do female executives really have to be like men to get the respect and gain a position? And doesn't that sort of take something away of the value of having a woman in a leadership position? Like what's the other way?
Absolutely. I would say at the crux of it all, I truly believe in authenticity, and being an authentic leader is pretty important. And there have been women who feel that embodying a male persona or attitude and presence is necessary, and that might be their feeling it might be also industry related, whether it's in a male dominated industry, automotive or finance, or there might be a sentiment that is necessary. For me personally, I have not felt that was necessary, and certainly more importantly would be counterintuitive for me trying to be an authentic leader. And I would say for me the most important piece of it is going about managing as a leader with integrity and embodying leadership, serving as carrying a servant leader mindset to leading, whether it's my internal team or external independent sales force. And I don't believe that I need to embody the persona or style of a counterpart male, because it's simply not true to who I am. And I don't think I could actually do it well. Now, it's funny that you asked that, because I think years and years ago, my husband even said to me, you need to be meaner. You need to be like a man. And I think that's so wrong. It's unfortunate that is associated with having power or influence. I think influence can be had through persuasion, through logic, through compassion, through mutual respect and collaboration. So if I look at these as the acting principles that I can employ, which I believe also are transferable between male and female, then that I think are the most successful principles and tools that you can apply as a leader to be effective.
Yeah, and these are the very qualities, aren't they? These are the very qualities that lead us to, those varying stages from tolerance to acceptance in terms of diversity, right? The same qualities that you're describing.
Absolutely. I mean, these values are the core values of Princess House. Are also the core values that I spent quite a bit of time talking in my first book that launched this summer. And they are qualities, they are skill sets that can be developed and can be mastered and can be used to overcome fear and to overcome obstacles and to build and develop personally and professionally. They really are. And they are transferable to different industries. They are transferable to different positions and levels. And of course, I think leads to success. They can lead to success if they are done with intention.
That's great. Why don't you give us the quickie on the book? Tell us a little bit about why you wrote it.
The book is called Fearless Living, 8 life-changing values. Life-changing values for breakthrough success. And it was a project where I really wanted to take my lessons learned from the days as a student to my professional career, and to highlight how 8 very specific values can be identified, harnessed, practiced, mastered, and applied for overcoming fear. Fear for me was important to highlight because it's a common denominator that binds us all, and it crosses boundaries. It is a common denominator that every single one of us at one point in time and at any day in time will experience. And fear also elicits some real physiological reactions from any individual. You've heard the phrase of fight or flight. I also believe there's a third. I think there's fight, flight, and freeze. All 3, although they might seem reactionary, are actually choices. And if you think about them as choices, then you have to choose and decide what to do in a moment of fear. Those 8 values that I talk about are respect, collaboration, agility, determination, results-driven, compassion, passion, and accountability. They're broken up into 3 sections, which are very important. There are 4 that fall into the category of me, things that I can do as a catalyst for managing fear and change. Me and others. Something like collaboration is critical. It is something that you not only have to practice, but you have to kind of play in the sandbox with somebody else for it to be to maximize and realize the benefit. And then there are 2 other values that fall into me in the world. What we do, what we decide to do, how we respond to moments of fear has an impact on the world and the world around us. So it's a quick read. There are 8 chapters, 1 for each of the values. And throughout the book, it really isn't just my story. It's the story of women that I've also had the honor of knowing, meeting, encountering that have exhibited and demonstrated examples of how they've utilized and harnessed these values to overcome fear. Fear is something, I'm not professing that you can live a life with no fear. I think fear happens upon us. It is very natural. But how we respond to it, what we do with that fear, can be pretty powerful. If you think about sometimes when something scares you, does it not generate adrenaline? Do you
Absolutely.
not physically tense up, right? Do you not physically, almost the muscles tense up? There's a biological physical reaction. Now think about it. If you could take that same energy, that same emotional, mental, and physical energy, re-divert it to something else to get past it, the triumph at the end is pretty exhilarating. Somebody who has a fear of heights and takes that first sky jump
Yeah.
Or maybe something as simple as just walking on the balcony, right? Let's not be so crazy there.
Or in the direct selling context, right? Like
That's
just talking to somebody. I mean, what I hear you saying, Connie, is, these, and I'm sure it's no coincidence as well, right? Because you wrote the book, but these are the experiences that so many direct sellers have, which lead to them not finding success and the opportunity that they signed up to do.
That's exactly it.
It's not because they don't want to do it. It's not because the opportunity is not real. It's because of these fears that come up that, like you said, either cause them to fly, right? Or cause them to freeze, which eventually make them fly.
That's exactly it. Or they run, right? There's flight. So you're right. It is about empowering an individual to overcome the circumstances that can be overcome. Now, listen, I can't control there are factors that in any individual's life that are uncontrollable, right? There are situations where you don't control. How you respond to something that you can't control is in and of itself a skill set.
It's a mess. It's a major skill set. It's like probably one of the best skill sets you could develop in your life. Yeah.
That's exactly it. Right. And it's funny because it seems like even in situations when you feel like there's no choice or when all the choices are awful choices, there is a choice. And when you choose not to do anything, that is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so why not choose to win? Why not choose to overcome? And why not choose to excel and overcome whatever that obstacle is? One walk across the balcony will not rid you of the fear of heights, but it will rid you of the fear of being mowed down by the fear of heights. So it will also help prove that you can move past it. And maybe, again, this is what mastery comes. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And the better you get at it, the higher the probability is that you might be able to overcome the paralysis of that fear.
That's right.
They're all tools. Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a lot of what really good training for the field is all about. And that's kind of leading me. I mean, you may have already given me the answer to a couple of my next questions, but I'll let you be the judge of that. And I was going to say, how does that translate into the way that you run the business? Continuing along the theme of diversity, but really for anyone, what can we do as direct selling companies to make sure that more people in every different type of community have more positive experiences with our brands?
I think it starts, first of all, with embracing diversity. It really does. Having a positive experience with our customers and our direct sellers, as well as our companies, is embracing and understanding the diversity that exists. And from there, finding the common denominators. And when you find the common denominators and you train your sales field, and for me, even my internal team, allowing them the opportunity to understand where somebody's coming from. You know how you've always heard, I'm sure you've heard when people say, meet them where they're at. It is meeting them where they're at, but not settling for where they're at. And growth for my sales field, I'll take it in a two-prong approach. For my sales field, in terms of training, personal development, it comes a lot with affirmation. It comes a lot through skills building. Building confidence comes from is building skills. Building skills is equipping them for success. Success breeds success and confidence. It's a very cyclical reference when you do that. So for us, how we provide that is through it has traditionally been, we're going to be 55 years old come January. It's a really huge milestone for a company as well as most especially in our industry. And we're very proud of it. And through the years, we've been very high touch. What we've tried to incorporate and done successively better and better each year is apply high tech to it. And it's a combination because high tech can feel code. High tech can feel for a sales force who's used to high touch as if you don't want to talk to me, right? So there's a balance, and employing tools and technology that allow us to do that helps us expand our reach. That's really what we're trying to do, is amplify the effect and the benefit of high touch.
And you guys have had a lot of results with that, especially in the Hispanic market. I know when you came in, the Hispanic market wasn't, the size and scope of the business that it is today. when you came in, was this your plan? Was it like, hey, let's go get the Latin market, or did it kind of come around in some other way?
Oh, no, I would tell you the Hispanic market actually was growing and building at Princess House when I came on board. And it started many years ago. It always starts with one person, right? I've started countries with one person, one leader, one founder. And it's sort of similar story here at Princess House. But I wish we could take credit. It really wasn't some ingenious strategic design. It started as something that happened to us. One Hispanic leader was enlightened and really inspired by another leader for the opportunity to, frankly, she'll tell you it was to earn a trip to Spain. It was on her bucket list. And so and she loved our products. Our products were beautiful. And at that time, we were crystalware. So 55 years ago, we were not even the product line that exists today. So in the 55 years, we've really evolved in that. But the Hispanic market began with one person. And from there, as we all know, the organic magic of our direct selling industry is that it duplicated and replicated from there. What we have done purposefully is we have gotten very good, really very, very good about how we communicate, how we engage, how we interact, from meetings to music to videos to phone calls to in-person meetings. We've learned and been able to execute on very specifically tailored and culturally relevant ways to continue to attract and retain and develop that Hispanic sales force base. We're very, very good at that. And we've learned to do that while balancing the non-Hispanic sales force base. And yes, it has led to the company today still being around over 85% of our sales force and therefore customer base in the Hispanic market. So what didn't start off as a strategic endeavor is now very much so a large part of our strategies and continuous strategic growth initiatives. You know, we have in the past we've had 7 consecutive years of growth. Last year's growth was double the rate of the year before. And for us as a company who is only in one country for now, and with to this date still, I'm almost afraid to say, still yet to launch e-commerce, it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, that is. So
and
we'll get to
6
technology
years ago,
in a
Michelle,
second.
the only way you could join us was by fax.
Oh, yeah. Wow. All right. Well, you're coming a long way.
We have.
So how does all this focus on diversity, not just in the terms we've been talking before, but diversity of experience for different types of people, translated into a corporate culture for you? And what are the elements of culture that you try to create, not only in the field, but inside corporate as well?
You know, it's interesting. As we went through these past couple of years, I would say a brand refresh. It really was an opportunity for us to look deep into our DNA, to look at our heritage, to look at the brand, the nuggets and the essence of who we are. Because the brand at the end of the day is the people. Who we are as a company, the people. You know, the first part of it, we developed a purpose statement. We threw away the old mission, vision, and value statement, and we said, what is our reason for being? Why do we exist? Why do we do what we do? Why do we show up every day? And what we ended up with was our purpose statement. And our purpose statement starts with, our power is our people. Our people are who we are. Our products make life healthier and more beautiful. And our business inspires dreamers. It rewards for excellence, and it transforms lives. So it's pretty simple for us. But in those words, it's very deep with a lot of meaning. And in terms of corporate culture, these are the tenets in which we hold ourselves accountable for. And along with those 8 values I shared with you earlier, we have worked very hard to foster a culture where we are collaborating, and collaboration requires embracing diversity, different thinking, different mindset, different backgrounds, right? Different culture. And it requires us to also model compassion as well as passion and respect. This is how we interact with each other. And what I hope we've been able to do, and I would tell you, this is my maybe two things that are most important for me in us to continue growing and innovating and expanding is to apply in our cultural dynamics as well as our behavior is agility and accountability. Agility is difficult because it's scary. Agility requires us to learn and to apply what we learn and to change it, and change it often. And as a company that has been around for a long time, that's scary because you can imagine you develop habits, right? After 7 days, it's a habit. Now imagine a habit that's been fostered over 20 years, 50 years, 30 years, 15 years, right? And agility is one that requires conscious risk-taking. And that's really what I hope we've been able to foster and continue to foster is the safety of taking risk and the encouragement of being agile. And it is required. We are in a fast-paced moving environment in the consumer space, the retail space, technology space. It is requiring us to be better and more agile citizens. But accountability for that is really important too. And I think that's something that's been very important for us is to, we describe accountable as we do what we say when we say we'll do it. That's easier said than done, isn't it?
Much easier.
Much easier.
And you're talking about something that a lot of other leaders, not only that I interview, but just other leaders of direct selling companies that I know around the world, talk to me about all the time. These same challenges of us moving into a different world, both in terms of who our sales force is around the world, how technology is impacting our ability to remain competitive, and how, companies in direct selling need to become a little bit more agile in this age of increased accountability, of increased transparency. And, we can do it. We're set up, we can do it.
That's exactly it. It's a discipline as well. It requires a discipline and a commitment. It's very easy to not be agile because it is the path of least resistance. And agility is something that I think because of the pace in which change is coming at us from all different areas is important because that is probably, we hear lots of buzzwords like disruptors and change agents. They are a big piece of our ability to remain relevant as an industry, as well as brands, and in our ability to retain and acquire customers to our businesses to consume our products and services.
Yeah. And, I think it's also a reflection that, this change in our culture and our business culture is also sort of changing the role of the executive. It used to be 20 years ago that you're a really good executive if you have really good ideas and that you're wrong less than everybody else. But nowadays, it's not necessarily about having the perfect idea from the get-go and being right more. It's about being able to pivot and jump this way and that way and try stuff and kind of fail faster and fail smarter than everyone else to figure out what the really right thing is.
That's exactly it. I think that's the biggest fear is failing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody asked me, I think my daughter asked me recently, what are you afraid of? You're not afraid of anything. I said, no, I have fears. I said, my biggest fear is fear of failing, fear of disappointing. And I think you can relate to this. It must have something to do with the immigrant experience because I think immigrants as a population and as a diverse group of immigrants, there is an immigrant mindset of not wanting to disappoint your parents, not wanting to fail your community.
Yeah.
You're expected. Yeah. You've made this big leap to seek out a better life. And this fear of failing at that it is self-imposed, completely self-imposed, but there is a big fear. And as executives, there is this fear of not being right all the time and a fear that you will be judged for that. And women, this is where being a woman probably does have a bigger play emotionally versus men. Women tend to be a whole lot harder on themselves and set higher expectations of themselves and are unforgiving when we feel we haven't met those expectations because of the multiple roles that women in general play. Let's face it. You're playing a role as a parent, a sibling, a caretaker, a leader, a teammate, and in our industry, in direct sales, you are a counselor, you're a psychologist, you're a trainer.
Totally.
You're a coach, you're all of that.
Big time.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
I think those are really significant pieces as any executive in today's world and today's business environment do have to grapple with and get a handle on. And I would say, too, you're right, agility is hard. Being agile is easier said than done.
Well, you know what they say is they say that, and if you think back on it, and they say always, it's very true that, if you think back on anything you've ever done or anything you've ever achieved in your life that was really worth doing, try to find one of them that was easy,
That's right.
So, just because it's hard, that means you got something there. There's juice in there, Let's move into technology. I understand that you guys are really into using data to better understand your people, better understand your business. How are you doing that right now? And why is it so important to you? And in this understanding and kind of getting into data and getting more into technology in the business, were there any kind of like whoa moments where when you started to dig in?
I think the whoa moment for us is when we actually started having the ability to collect some data. Remember, I just told you we're actually still running part of our business operations. We've been on a multi-year, multi-development, and it will continue of building new back-end and infrastructure. So again, probably one of the last companies on an AS400 green screen. And
Whoa.
yeah. So we've been on a multi-year project to uncouple very key critical systems from there. The first piece for us 3 years ago was CGI. So commissions, genealogy, and incentives was uncoupled for AS400 with the new backend. This summer, we uncoupled the piece of order entry and CSR. And our next phase will be uncoupling the operations, the warehouse management, the finance, et cetera. So you can imagine it's been a very evolutionary path for us. And since I've come on board, it's been purposeful. It's been methodical of uncoupling it to bring it into the new age of infrastructure, support, and technology. So our aha was, oh, wow, we actually can see who they are. And it's been enlightening because we've begun to, in the past 2 years, already begun to look at data points. Data points for us that we've begun to look at, especially as we've been developing strategic plans, is to look at the demographics. That's been extremely useful for us in terms of looking at demographic makeup of my Salesforce base and customer base. The other piece is also looking at what are the true levers that moves the top and bottom needle of a company. And for us, I think it's no magic that I'm sure everyone else looks at your distributor account. You look at their activity, you look at their productivity. We dig even deeper and we start looking at what do they do in the first month they're with us? What do they do in the first week they're with us? What do they do 2 months later, 3 months later, 4 months later? And that's where we can strategically start to pinpoint our opportunities. We had to start with a benchmark to understand what are they doing, when are they doing it, what are they doing, and when do they stop doing, so that we can truly then maximize investments that every company makes to acquire and keep people and keep them longer. So those have been really some critical factors for us and data points, not only that have informed our strategies, but also informed where we invest. Where do we invest? Because it's so easy to throw money at it when you want to change something. And if we're not very careful about it, you end up throwing too much money and a lot of money and not really changing what you thought you wanted to change.
Yeah, I mean, I see that a lot. I see a lot of companies, the promotion is kind of like, the kind of go-to sort of like tool in the toolbox. Mm-hmm. But what I see so often with so many companies is running promotions without really understanding, how to measure if they're really working, and then also the impact of them beyond the time period of the promotion itself.
That's right.
So what I'm hearing you say is that, by digging a little bit deeper, you can be much more conscious and aware of not only promotions, but any type of initiative that you want to put out there to get a better idea of, is it going to work? How do I actually know? Which is something I see a lot of companies don't really do. Like the only way they know is, well, sales went up. And it's like, well, that can be a kind of a foggy metric sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
And then, how do I know? And then what am I going to learn later so that the next promotion, I'm a little bit smarter about that next time?
Right. And, sales is not necessarily the best barometer of measuring whether the efficacy of a promotion or an investment. The reason for that is because you can buy sales. There's a cost to it. You want to increase your sales? Sure. You pay for it. You do. I mean, listen, those of us who work in the world like we do here, which is we admittedly have a pretty, I would say, sophisticated, complex, magical, amazing team that works on merchandising and promotions because we are promotionally driven. A lot of it is driven by the nature and the culture and expectations of my majority stakeholder. But I can tell you it comes at a price. So it isn't, do you want to increase? Sure. How much you want to pay for it to buy it? You can buy that top line sales growth, but is that the right thing to do? And is that cost worth it, right? Yep. What the data has forced us to do in many instances, whether it's putting together trip qualification, standards, or whether it's deciding whether we want a Salesforce driving promotion, is it's forced us, and I say forced us because it's forced us to decide what metric, whether it's one or two, and that's the hard part. It's one or two. What do we want to move? What I think we fall victim to, especially in our industry, because we're trying to move behavior, we're moving people, therefore moving their behavior, is we want this one trip, this one magical incentive trip to do everything. So you want this trip to increase sales, increase recruiting, increase leadership development growth, increase productivity. And to your point, it did one, not all. Did it work? I'm not sure, because you were trying to have it be the magic bullet. That's also hard, because who doesn't want one thing to do everything? And that's a struggle. That's a struggle because we want to make our investments go further. We want them to work. We want your dollar to work harder. And especially for new entrepreneurs and startup companies, you don't have enough money to do everything. So surely it will do everything. And I think that's a point of, it is a potential point of failure, let's put it.
So what's next then for you guys? What do you see in the future? I mean, it seems like you've been on this path. You're on this path for several years, decoupling yourself from the beast known as AS400. And so what's on the path for you? What are you most excited about next in terms of how you're using technology and data?
I'm excited, and the area of technology and data is to truly be, to execute on an infrastructure and technology that will allow me more direct access to the end customer. So there's a rich data mindset that you can gather, obviously, just being able to do that. And technology has been one of the limitations that's limited us from doing that, as well as the opportunity to engage and widen, I would say, amplify our reach. So I'm really excited about being able to execute and implement and go live on those next pieces that we're building. The other piece that I'm really excited about too is I see us in the next few years continuing to, here's that word again, diversify the demographic makeup of my Salesforce base, which also informs the diversification and requires the diversification of our product and services and how we serve up training, how we serve up engagement, how we measure that, as well as how we interact and engage with our new customers of tomorrow and our consultants of tomorrow. So how do we take what we've already built and how do we expand upon it and diversify it? And to me, diversification for our particular business is both geographic as well as demographic. And as we spent a lot of time talking about what layers of diversification means, there's a lot of opportunity for us. We are in a really very fortunate position that has been built over a lot of time, sweat, and effort in building a brand presence in the Hispanic market, which quite frankly is the growing market and the growing customer base for any brand in our country. So we are poised at a place where we can build upon that and deepen that foothold in the marketplace with that demographic.
Which brings me to the next point, which is this growing focus on the customer. The recent segmentation by the USDSA kind of showing how it really does split up and how many people in our fields really are behaving more like customers than as salespeople, regardless of what, a database might call them.
Right.
There's this growing idea of giving people different experiences with your brand based on the experience they are looking for versus the experience the company wishes everyone would have.
Right.
So what does this concept mean to you? There's a lot of companies, kind of scramble to create customer programs, because of the Worklife situation or whatever. But few put a lot of energy into like the customer experience. They created the classification, they dropped a bunch of people into a bucket, right? And then they were like, all right, now let's keep going and recruiting. So what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I think each company is going to find themselves in a unique position based on their primary source of sales model. And part of it also has to do, I think, in the age in which they were born. What I mean by that is if you were born in the age of technology, your ability to identify, categorize, and classify your customers versus distributors might be much further ahead from a company who was not born in that age, right? And has the support systems to do that. I also think who you are as a company in terms of your primary source of sales and business model, where your point of sale and transactions are taking place, also has an impact on what your, let's call it, continuous need is as it relates to monitoring, engaging, and let's call it segmenting your communications and marketing to customers, what level you'll need to develop. So let's just use Princess House's case, for example. We still today feel very strongly that our most viable opportunity for my independent business owner and consultant is through a party plan model. So identifying to and engaging with the customer, the end customer, is very clear for us. How we as a company support it is we support it through the development of programs that are specifically earmarked for the different levels and layers of my end customer. My end customer is not only my consultant, she is also the hostess who supports my consultant in her business. And then she is also the end customer who purchases either in or outside of a group selling party situation. So for us, we have very methodical processes as well as programs that we develop on a regular, pretty much monthly basis of communications that are meant to engage, attract a end customer. We have very specific, again, programs, promotions, offers, specials, perks for a hostess and then the consultant. So it's actually very clear. We do have tailored programs for these different audiences. We also communicate virtually to these different audiences, different language, different modes and methods of communication, whether it's through private Facebook groups with your business, with the consultants, and or your public page, and or on the consultant's portal, and or through print. We still do print in every single month. We do still have print pieces that go to the business side of it, the consultant side, and then there's a front-facing consumer side of it that is a tool that is still actively used as a business building tool.
That's great. That's amazing.
For us, it is very easily isolated. What we're looking forward to is being able to actually not only for better gather and better analyze is that end customer, because again, we were born in the age before technology. So the customers for us today, that database is not as deep as we want it to be. And we know that's why we've been on this multi-year build, is to build up the capacity and the technology to be able to support it. We know they're there because, well, let's face it, the type of goods that I sell are very difficult, nor is it attractive for you to, I would say, amass a warehouse full of. What are you going to do with 50 quart stock pots? There's no room for it.
So how is all this work of segmenting people and communicating with them differently and all that stuff paying off for you already?
I would say it's actually done. It's tremendous. It's part of what's fueled our growth. It's very critical to being able to attract and retain a Salesforce base because of what we promote as the best way for them to build a business and to maximize the time that they decide they want to dedicate to Princess House. So it's working well. We've also developed a very robust and even more intuitive way of engaging and getting insight. I would call it consumer insight. Our consultants are the voice of their customers. They really are. And so the ability to use Facebook surveys, the ability to do online surveys, pop-ups when they log into their back office has really helped inform us on a lot of key decisions, whether it's programs, whether it's using, would this attract you as an incentive? Would this be attractive for your customer? Even down to, is this the right color of metal for a new collection we're thinking of? There was actually one very good example where we almost went forward with a new category of home decor in a color of metal for the metal that we were using. That was not what they picked. We almost went through with it. Everyone here was convinced that's the color we want. We went out to market in our Facebook survey. Overwhelmingly, the answer was not what we picked. We could have made a very big mistake.
Yep.
So it's really helped us inform us on some of the decisions that we've made going forward, whether it's product, whether it's marketing or communications and, Salesforce incentives.
Well, that again goes back to culture, right? And clearly this culture that you've built, which is different than a lot of other companies. A lot of corporates are like, corporate knows best, and we might listen to what they have to say, but at the end of the day, they're the kids and we're the grown-ups. And having them have that voice at so many steps along the way is a really mature choice. So getting to know you a little, Connie, as we start to wrap things up, I have a few questions that I ask everybody, so I'll ask you so we can get to know you a little more. Firstly, I see a lot of execs in the space burning the candle on both ends. Running around. You too, you spend a lot of time traveling. Your family lives in California. You're here. You're over in Massachusetts, and then you're obviously traveling to do all different sorts of business and visit the field, I'm sure, in different markets. How do you find balance with all of this stuff? What can you share with people about any tools or ideas or principles that help you strike some kind of balance in all the craziness?
Well, thank goodness for cell Wi-Fi and technology. I would say when I was doing internationalization 10, 15, 20 years ago, before cell phones, before internet, very, very difficult to balance that. But I would say the tools that allow us to stay connected with family are limitless at this point today. You can obviously stay connected through all different types of your cellular, your phone, whether it's Skype or FaceTime, WhatsApp. There are tools that enable that to happen. What you can't rely on technology of in terms of managing balance and work-life balance is your own discipline. So I would say discipline is a personal skill set that I work on all the time. Disciplining and setting time for yourself and priorities to make time for family. It's very easy, especially when there's time zone differences, to not be disciplined about it. And when you think about time is once you miss it, if bedtime is come and gone, you can't call it midnight, right, for the kids. And you can't say goodnight because they're already in bed. So discipline is a real key in managing work-life balance. And work-life balance, it's funny, I've actually been asked this question often, especially as women. I don't know, sometimes people seem to think that only women are parents. That's not true. Dads are too, right? Dads have work-life balance challenges too. But I think it's a misnomer. I think it's a misnomer because balance implies equality. Balance implies 50-50. I don't believe that there is such a thing, at least not for me. Some others might have a differing opinion. For me, balance is what is necessary at that particular time frame in your business needs as well as your personal needs. There's going to be times when you need to give 70% of your time to an illness in the family, and it's going to be shifted out of, they're only 24 hours a day, so you can't make time. But That's where it's just going to shift. There are going to be times, I can tell you, like right now during budget time when we're preparing next year's budget and strategic plans, this is when I choose, and these are choices I make. And that's where accountability comes into play, right? And I am accountable to myself as well as to my responsibilities and my role as the leader of this company. And in this particular time frame where we're working on budgets, where I will spend 3 weeks away from home straight, because this is where I need to be to do what I need to do. And there will be times when I choose with difficulty, where I choose what I miss. There might be a concert I miss. There might be a school event that I miss. But again, those are choices. They're difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. And I'm not saying there's any right or wrong. It is what is right for you, but it is a discipline to make those choices purposefully. Because what you don't want to do as an executive, it's very easy to fall victim to yourself. And it's very easy to become a victim of your own lack of discipline. So, for example, what do I mean? It's very easy to say, oh, I didn't have time for that. Well, those are choices, right? You know, when people say I don't have time, well, you had time to go play games, to go on play Candy Crush. You had time to go to the movies. You had time to, there's time. When people say I don't have time for exercise, yes, there is. There's time. You got to make it. You have to choose that that's what you want to put your time into. So
that's right.
You know, it's hard. So work-life balance for me it's always an adjustment. It's rebalancing all the time. There's no formula. There really isn't. There's no set formula for it. It's always being very, very agile in what the needs are.
Well, you may have already given me the answer to this next question, but let's see. If you could place an ad on the internet that every person that goes online tomorrow would see, what would that ad say, or what would it do?
An ad about me?
Anything you want, but let's not make it about business. Let's not make it like a Princess House ad. Let's just make it something that you would want people to see online, some message that you would give the world, basically.
Right now, what comes to mind is I would say, choose to live fearlessly.
That's great. Perfect. Is there a charity or some special cause that's close to your heart?
I'm going to be very honest. There isn't one particular cause that is very close to my heart. I think for me, there are causes that are important to me that I support all of. I can tell you what they are. There are some that are very personal because they have been particular instances where they've affected my family or myself. You know, I would tell you that cancer is something that's important, and it is all forms of cancer. I'm not even sure if there's anybody in this world who cancer hasn't touched, unfortunately. I would tell you it's interesting. For me, music, and there's an organization called Broadway Cares, is very important, was very important to me growing up, is still very important to me. And music as a tool to enable people, I really believe in the power of music, of theory, in helping people be more productive, mathematically inclined. It has been proven, actually, that those with musical skills or exposure to music helps them become better engineers, better mathematicians, because of timing, because of count, because of cadence and rhythm. And music was very important to me growing up because I'm a fan of music. I played 3 instruments, I sang, and so I support a lot of causes that are related to music education in public schools. I'm a public school kid. My family was, I went through all New York City public schools and worked very hard to get into Stuyvesant High School, went to Brooklyn College. And so I am a great supporter of schools. I actually do fund and support a lot of classrooms through donors' truths of the schools that I went to, whether it's my elementary school in Chinatown or Brooklyn, my old high school, my junior high school. So very specific projects of teachers who I believe who are trying to make a difference in the kids that they come in contact with. And I was one of those kids. And I would tell you, one of my teachers from 3rd grade, I am still here now, I shouldn't tell you, it'll age me, almost 40 years later, is I still am very, very close to. And she was the first person in my life who said, you can do anything. And the power that she had to help me, as again, when you're immigrants, your parents can't really help you very much, especially if they're not fluent in English.
Yeah, I had the same thing.
Yeah, so I support a lot of causes, and teachers have a very special place in my heart, and public education and music, and of course, some of those health crises that have impacted either my family or me personally, and they do range from cancer to heart disease to diabetes. I would say those are probably the main pieces of it that I can share with you. So there isn't one heartstring. I do try to kind of support those that are most important to me.
If you could go back to any time in your life and meet yourself back then and give yourself a piece of advice, when would you go back to, and what advice would you give yourself?
I think I would go back to when I was in high school. When I was in high school, and I'm sure you know and you've heard of Stuyvesant High School in New York,
Sure.
growing up in New York, the science school. So I went to Stuyvesant High School.
It's like, for the audience, it's like the legendary high school of New York City.
Today, you would be shocked. I was just looking, my cousin, obviously my whole family is still there, but my cousin's daughter is looking at high schools. We're talking about today, 21,000 students applying for 800 spots.
Oh my gosh.
When I applied for Stuyvesant, it was around 4,000 applying for 190 something spots. And it's testing. That's all it is. It's merit and it's testing. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was the beginning and the end of the world. And I think I would go back and say to myself that it's just the beginning, and this does not define who you will become.
What language would you say it in?
I think I would say it in English. English for me was my dominant, and it probably in the back of my head would be my father saying it in Chinese. Although his message would be contrary to what I just told you.
It's funny when you're multilingual how like sometimes you talk to yourself in like different languages. At least me anyway.
There are like I have to tell you, there are phone numbers I can rattle out in Chinese because that's how I learned it. Yeah, there are phone numbers I can rattle out, and I have to think about it when you do. Yeah, or Spanish.
Well, Connie, thank you so much for sharing. You've shared so many interesting and amazing details about your life and about how you run the business and how you strike balance with things that are important to you. I'm sure our audience is going to get so much value out of this, and I hope you enjoyed the chat. And let's have you back sometime again soon and see how things continue to evolve.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I really enjoyed the time. I appreciate the opportunity to share. Thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure.